So, good morning from the south coast of the UK this morning. It's really a privilege to be be part of the HealthFlix community, and I'm super grateful to all the beautiful people that have managed in this time to set this extraordinary initiative up with all these amazing speakers. Well, not that I'm one of them, but just to be part and parcel of this. My name is Jyoti, Manuel, and I'm the founder of Special Yoga. And I've been working with children with special needs and their families and educators for many, many years. And I'm so aware that in this time in this epidemic, the shutdown creates a very different picture. I mean, there's a lot of people on Facebook at the moment saying how lovely it is that life is peaceful for them and that they can find stillness. But for families who have children with special needs, who perhaps don't sleep or who are super anxious or who need 24/7 care, and there isn't respite available as there would have been when prior to the virus, that it's actually a very, very, very challenging time. So I thought it would be useful potentially to share some of the practices that I use when I hit overwhelm, and to just look at in the moment practices. It's one thing, having time to sit on our mat every day and do our 20 minutes breathing and our asana practice and, some deep relaxation, but not all the parents who are in that position are going to have that luxury, because it is a luxury actually. So I think that alongside any moments that one does have to be able to take time to breathe and to take care of ourselves, it also feels that tools that we can use in the moment when things just feel overwhelming are also useful. I'm also really aware that, as a parent, and I'm a parent of two kids, that actually we need to really take care of ourselves as much as we can, so that we are as full and as full really, both kind of emotionally, energetically, so that we can be of the best service. It's like on airplanes, they say to you, put your mask on before you put the mask on for anyone else. So of course, if you're not able to be of service, you can't help anybody. And I think that goes the same for parents. And I think there's a real tendency for parents to take care of your children before you take care of you. And there's something in that dance I think is really important, of how we, are able to protect ourselves, take care of ourselves, nourish ourselves, whilst we are still taking care of our children too. So I thought this morning that I would share a variety of different practices that both I use and I also share when I teach, to help parents who are struggling, and to help people that are finding these paths, this moment, perhaps not quite so easy as others might be. So the first thing that I think is really important is the level of compassion to ourselves, because actually we're doing an amazing job as parents. And although sometimes and oftentimes I've had the experience of really feeling like I'm not good enough, and I can't meet everybody's needs, and I hit that kind of place of utter overwhelm. At that moment in time, what I'm aware of is two things. One is I've lost my connection to the divine. And the other is that actually I am good enough. And it's just that same inner voice that I think many of us, or probably all of us walking on this planet, have today, that manifests in different ways of not being good enough. And I think parenting is one of those areas where that arises and can arise a lot, particularly when we've got children who are challenged and challenging, and particularly also when we're in the place where we're overtired, we're stressed out, we haven't had the mindful moments to take a breath for ourselves, etc., etc. So I've been following the work of Dr. Kristen Neff for a long time, who is not only is an extraordinary doctor of self-compassion, but she's also the parent of a child with autism, severe autism. So, her practices come from a very deep place of knowing that actually this really works. And the pieces of the practice that I've taken and used very regularly for myself, when I hit those moments of utter and complete overwhelm, which I imagine every parent has done, will do, and is probably very familiar with that experience, is to just take a moment to really deeply acknowledge that this is a moment of hell. This is a horrible moment. Sometimes you might hear me swearing to myself, which I'm not going to do on camera right now, but something that where we just acknowledge that this is really just awful in this moment. And I tend to just bring my hands onto my heart and just acknowledge it for myself. And there's something in the acknowledgement of it to myself that brings me back to me, as opposed to, that kind of sensation of panic and kind of strong emotional experience that will arise, I'm sure, for everybody in those moments. And then the other piece of the practice that I think is really helpful, or has really helped me with what she offers, is just to say to myself, so if I were my best friend, what would I do? What would I say to me? And generally my best friend would give me a hug. So that sensation of just giving yourself a really tight squeeze and going, it's okay, and actually just bringing yourself back into your body. So I tend to squeeze myself quite tightly. And actually, I think a lot of the children need to be squeezed quite tightly too, particularly at the moment when anxiety is high. And we just literally, it's okay. And the last piece that I think is important for me is that, which is not so much something that Kristen talks about, but I feel is very, very strongly for me, is this moment will pass. This too will pass, as everything does. These are just moments in time, and in those moments, we tend to forget that they are just moments. And if we can just remind ourselves that this moment will pass, I can squeeze myself. I'm okay. It's okay. And that kind of inner reassurance, that I find that to be super helpful. And I noticed on one occasion when I first started to do this practice, my children were really kicking off. And I had a tendency to be quite reactive to that prior to that. And I remember sitting and just doing that practice. And both of the children suddenly turned around and looked at me as if something completely different had happened. And actually nothing had happened other than I had changed my state by just calming myself down rather than being reactive, by, preventing that moment from going overboard. So I find that to be really helpful. And then sometimes when I hug myself, I also just tap myself to acknowledge that actually I'm doing okay, that it is okay, and that I'm doing a good job. Because sometimes there isn't someone there who can reassure you in those moments when it feels like everything's collapsing for you. And so I think that those things that are actually very simple that we can do in the moment are super helpful. The other thing that I also obviously do, because I'm a yoga practitioner of many, many years, is to use my breathing. So I tend to also bring my hands onto my belly, or actually even on my chest, but generally on my belly, just to try and bring my breath down. I think using your hands on your body, I found to be super helpful to help me to get out of the mental chaotic state and into my body. And again, this is practices that you can share with your kids too, is to help them to bring their hands onto their bodies. We can do it together. You could even have a hand on them, they can have a hand on you. You can share breathing together in those moments when things feel, where things could potentially get out of control. And just start to see if you can just feel the quality of breath underneath your hands. The quality of touch is really helpful, I find, to just bring you back out of all of this. Another practice that's, again, in the moment, very simple practice, is just to put my feet on the ground, feel the contact that my feet are making, whether it's on the ground, in my shoes, but just, sometimes I squish my toes around a bit just to make sure that I feel my feet. I can stretch my toes, lift my toes, squeeze my toes, whatever. And sometimes I even bend down and, put pressure in my feet. And what I tend to find is that what that does is, again, it brings the energy down, because what we want to do is to bring the charge, which is generally energetically up here, down into our body to meet it, greet it, and calm it. The another thing that I think is also really important is our self-talk. And it's very easy in those moments to beat yourself up, because sometimes we do lose our tempers, sometimes we do get annoyed, sometimes we do get upset. And actually just to acknowledge that we're human, and that, we're not superhuman. Actually, I think all parents are superhuman, especially parents who are parenting challenged children. But we also are human, and we are going to, all sorts of things are going to happen, and it's okay. And it's okay. And how do we change our self-talk to be able to soothe ourselves in the moment? What would you want to hear someone say to you? Generally, what I would want to say is, it's okay, it's really okay, you're doing okay. And just to really hold on to yourself in those moments. So I also have a tendency of squeezing my hands. The point in the center of your hand is a very good point for breathing. I also have a tendency of squeezing my fingers, which I think is also really lovely and good for the children, because again, it creates sensation in the body. And I think any practice that helps you to feel more embodied as opposed to in the mental chatter is going to help you. And of course, with the fingers, you've also got, the Chinese system of meridians and energy lines that run through your hands. So actually, when you're stimulating your fingers, you're also potentially clearing blockages in your energy system. So I would highly, highly recommend that. So in terms of breathing practices, I think that, as I said, our breath is really useful. Dr. Brown and Dr. Gerbag, who've both been on here on Netflix, teach coherent breathing, which is a practice that I do daily. And have done since I met them, actually, just over a year ago. And I found it to be deeply calming for my nervous system to do every day. So I would highly recommend working with that. But in the moment, if you start to do those practices, coherent breathing is an even, slow in and out breath. Sometimes you can use your hands, as Dr. Gerbag was showing yesterday, where we breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and then out, 2, 3, 4, and so on. You can use chimes, as I think one of them was sharing the other day, but I tend not to use chimes when I'm working so much with the children. I tend to use counting. And I think for the children also, to participate in counting takes their focus away from whatever is distracting them at that moment in time, or whatever is charging them, creating the charge for them. And they can just, either move their hands, move their arms, or not, and just literally count the breath in and count the breath out, and count the breath in and count the breath out, so that we slow everything right down and start to stabilize the nervous system in another way. The other thing that I found to be really helpful, especially when children are in very high levels of anxiety, and they can't find their breath, which is quite common for a lot of children, is making sound. And what's scientifically been proven today is that the sound of Om, the resonant sound of Om, goes back into the vagus nerve, that in turn impacts and calms the nervous system. And I think there's something really lovely about just getting children to Om together. So, if you, and sometimes when I'm with one of my children, we might just sit and just Om back and forth to each other, or Om together, or we lay on the floor together and just see if we can feel each other as Oms, as we Om together, and just see if we can send the sound to ourselves. So I think there are a number of different kinds of practices that are really useful and really helpful to really be able to work together in calming, the nervous system. Another practice that I really like to use, and I think, it would work for children who are able to physically move their bodies, which would be shaking. And the idea here is that you shake off all of the difficult feelings that are inside you. Not that you want to try and get rid of anything, but actually the overstimulation of repetitive looping isn't helpful when we stay in story. So actually just allowing the emotions in the energy in motion, which is really what emotions are anyway, to just be allowed to move through you and shake out. And I think there's something really lovely about inviting the child to find their own music, to find music they like rather than music I might like or you might like, and just literally to shake the body out. So you start by shaking through the arms, and then you shake through the head, and then you shake through the legs, and you could turn it into dancing or whatever. But the idea is that you're actually really trying to shake off all of the challenging sensations that are arising within you, so that you can really and what happens then is movement, of course, is also really important. So breath works, but movement also works, because as we move, we unstick blocked energy that's within us. So and I think that dancing actually is a phenomenal way of moving energy, actually, or shaking is a really, both of those kinds of practices where you're almost free moving as opposed to necessarily following asana sequences, which would potentially be more difficult for some of these kids anyway, is really helpful. The thing that we need to remember at the end of those practices is to come back, put your feet on the ground, and just really, really have the sensation of the ground underneath your feet. So that after shaking and moving that kind of energy, you then come back to really earth, and really ground yourself back down again. So perhaps we might want to try that practice, actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand up, and I'm going to put some music on that I like, and we're going to just see if we fancy just shaking a little bit this morning. So, and just then you can explore how that feels and where we go with that. Just bear with me while I find a moment's music here. Okay. So, find a place and just start to shake through your arms, shake through your arms. And we'll just do it for a couple of minutes, just so that you start to have the experience of it. And then start to get your head involved and your legs involved. And you can shake any way you like. Shake up, shake down. So really shake everything out. So keep shaking, keep shaking, keep shaking. Even more, just really have the feeling you could just shake everything out of you. And then gently start to slow it down. And then just come to stand and just close your eyes for a moment. You might want to just bring your hands onto your belly, or you might just be more comfortable with your arms by your sides, and just explore how your body feels now. Notice any sensations within you, and really feel the contact that your feet are making on the earth. Just taking a moment just to feel really grounded and really earthed as you allow the energy to drop down. So these are really useful ways of helping the children to settle. I also think that we can embody by really squeezing down. So we talked a little bit earlier about squeezing through your arms. So actually when we squeeze down through the arms, we can start to talk to our body. And I think that you can work with the children, you can squeeze them, you can invite them to squeeze themselves if that's possible for that child. You could also teach them how to squeeze themselves if that's possible for them. And we can squeeze our shoulders. And there's something really lovely about just squeezing our shoulders and just, like bringing all that tension, energy down and wiping it off you. Wiping it down through you so that you really start to do that. So squeezing down through your arms, it's like I'm in my body. You could say hello to my arm. We can just start to feel that. You can start to feel it through your fingers. You can do it with me as we do it. And just start to just really feel the sensation of what happens when we really start to feel our bodies. So just take a moment just to notice that your one arm may feel different to the other. And then perhaps we can do the other side. So squeezing, 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 squeezing down through the arms. And then I think we can also squeeze our body. So we can squeeze our chest, we can squeeze our head. This is super helpful for just bringing the left and right hemispheres together. This can be incredibly calming. So it's just above, a lot of hair here, but it's just above your ears. And you really it's almost like you're pushing the sides of your head together to bring the left and right hemispheres of the brain together. This can be incredibly calming for you and for children. And, oftentimes we have this tendency of, when things feel overwhelming, where do you put your hands? It's really interesting because if you watch yourself, you're probably giving yourself what you need without realizing you're doing it. But if you did it with more intentionality and with more awareness that actually you're doing it, you can use those movements then to really calm yourself. And the children oftentimes are doing those things too, actually. So if we were to really just squeeze the right and left hemispheres of your brain together, take some nice deep breaths with the intention of just bringing balance and calm to your system. And then what you could do is just tap that into your body. Just tap it, tap, 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 tap. I found that to be very helpful as well. And then we can also work down through the legs. So you can squeeze, I'm just going to move the camera a little bit so you can see me. You can squeeze down through the legs, right the way down, squeeze your feet. So you're actually squeezing through your feet, through your toes, same thing on the other side. And then just take a moment as we do it just to see, so, I can feel my beautiful leg. And we can start to, perhaps just acknowledge your leg and just, I'm in my body. I can feel my leg. And then if we just take a moment to just notice how that might feel for you as you just start to have a greater sensation within your body, within your feet. And of course, as we squeeze our feet, if you want to just keep going for a moment, just to keep squeezing through your feet, squeeze, 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 and just notice the sensations that arise in your body as you start to have a different relationship with it. And then, of course, what happens is that the mental stuff starts to go away because you're feeling your body, which I think is so important for us when we're in overwhelm as parents, but also for the children when they're in overwhelm or they're having their moments of struggle and difficulty, is just to be able to come back and be here. So lastly, the asana practices are useful, unquestionably. I think that there's the practices that I tend to use a lot is, to calm and support the child would be to lay on the floor, stretch right out. So you stretch your arms right over your head, legs as far away, your feet, your toes and your fingers as far away from each other as possible, taking a couple of breaths and then bringing your knees in towards your chest and giving yourself a really big squeeze. And then again, as you inhale, you stretch back out again, and you exhale and you bring your body back in. So you're effectively opening and closing. So as you open, you stretch, you're sending all the messages through the body from stretching, and then you come back into a calm, connected place back in with your body. And we tend to repeat that quite a lot as a movement to help the body to relax. And then as the knees come into the chest, I think there's something really useful about rocking and soothing ourselves. So sometimes when, if I'm feeling an overwhelm and I have the opportunity to sit on the floor, which isn't always, I might just, bring myself into a child's pose, or I might bring myself into laying on my back with my knees and towards my chest, but always with that intention of loving myself, of holding myself, of squeezing myself, so that I start to feel that connection in my body. And as I perhaps rock my knees backwards and forwards, then I start to develop a kind of soothing sensation. Rocking is very, very soothing generally. So, there are many ways of soothing the body also through asana, and sometimes we need some dynamic movement as well. So again, that would depend on the physical abilities of the child, and also how much time you may have to stretch your body. But it's amazing, we could just stretch our arm, we could just be standing in the kitchen for a moment stretching, and then just come back into our heart. So it's combining and learning to really deeply listen to our internal needs. And I think that the more I am able to, just stop for a second and just go, okay, so what's going to help me to self-soothe in this moment? Because the more that I self-soothe, the more the children are going to be okay. And because then the energy field that I'm putting out supports them, keeps them in a safety, a zone of emotional safety, because the adult present as the rock, which is what we are as a mother or as the primary carer, if we are the primary carers, it might be the dad, but as the parent, is we want to be calm. We want to be calm. We want to be centered. And I think it's super, super, super important that whatever it takes for us to give ourselves, allow ourselves, nourish ourselves as much as feasibly possible, so that we can be the best service, not only to ourselves, but to our children as well. So I hope this has been useful to you. I'm going to finish talking now, and I'm going to invite any questions for the next 10-15 minutes, if there are any. No open questions. Okay, somebody in the chat. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I hope this was helpful to you. So I'm wondering, are you? I don't know who you all are that are on, because I can't see the list of people. But are you parents? Are you, are you parents, or are you carers, or who are you? So there's a question. Can I ask? Does the shaking movement ever overstimulate the child? If you do it for too long, there is no question that you could overstimulate the child. I think if you've got a child who's in high levels of arousal, my sense would be perhaps shaking wouldn't perhaps be the best practice. Or if I did it, I would really settle it, do it for a very short period of time, and then I would actually come back, help the child to ground, really squeeze back into the body. Because one of the things obviously you're doing when you're shaking is is the energy is flying around. And so I would keep it short, and then I would really counter that with really coming into the body to help the child to come back inside again. I hope that helps answer that question. So I'm a speech and language therapist. Wonderful session, so interesting. Have you got any advice with children with autism in particular, for example, to improve attention and engagement? Well, there are a number of different practices, I think, that can help a child to engage and attend. And, obviously one of the things for children with autism is to be present, because energetically they're often not embodied. And I think whatever pathway of practice that is going to help that child to be more present in their body is going to help them to engage and attend. We've just set up an online platform at Special Yoga, so we are about to deliver a online course for children with autism, yoga and mindfulness for children with autism. So please do check out our website that has a number of different tools, a number of different modules. So hopefully that would be helpful to you. So our platform is www.specialyoga.thinkific, thinkific.com. I hope it's on my bio, actually. Another question: would you do breathing work before, after the shaking, or a bit of both? Well, sometimes yes and no. I think that breath work before, if the child is able to access their breath before, great. If they're not able to access their breath, then what the shaking might do is it might just like help the child to release some of the excess excess energy is the wrong expression, but just to release some of the pent up emotions, if you like, so that then they can come back and breathe. But I would try it anyway. It's not going to be helpful. It's not going to be a one size fits all. I mean, I think the thing that we have to remember with all the children is they're all individuals, and the conditions are just labels that help us to have some guidelines as to how to help to navigate them. But at the end of the day, they're all absolutely individual, and I don't think one size fits all ever. So I'm wondering whether there is anything else that anybody has come up. Somebody's asked, will this be rebroadcast? It will be on YouTube. I have a problem with my son. He doesn't like to squeeze himself or be squeezed. What can I do to calm him down? I would do breathing with him. Actually, I've met your son, Marcia. So I think that the breathing would probably help him. And it might be actually, some children don't like the squeezing, but they might like very gentle touch. Just that kind of different caressing. So again, not, it's not necessarily that, that all children have to be really tightly squeezed, because some children will respond just to a very, very gentle touch, whereas other children would go completely bonkers, that hurts because it's impacting their nervous system. So you might want to try that. You might want to try tapping the body gently. You might want to just explore. I mean, watch him. How does he engage with his own body? The children are actually our teachers. So if you learn to really deeply listen and really watch the kids, then actually the likelihood is they'll guide you as to what they really need. So our job is also not to have a predetermined, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do the other, but actually to really take time to listen, observe, watch, because inevitably in their movements, in the way they breathe, in the way they touch, whether externally or themselves, will always give you a guide as to what they need, because actually they really know, even though that's not conscious. I have a one-to-one child with additional needs, autism and ADHD. I myself have ADHD and have 2 boys with autism. Looking at your course, but find online courses difficult, as need that presence of person sometimes. But was quite keen. Kim, why don't you just message us directly, and we can see if we can find a way to help you. You know, we're not, we are here to help, not to, you know, if people don't have the money, we'll find a way to support you anyway. I hope that's helpful to you. So I'm wondering if there is anything else. I've got a Q&A question here. How do you approach a child in the classroom who has Tourette's to calm them down, as teachers cannot touch? Thank you. Well, again, you know, I think that, you know, watching how, you know, I'm going to repeat myself, but I think watching, watching how the child moves, and what they do, and how they will give you a guideline as to how to help a child with, you're saying, Tourette's. Again, you know, one size is not going to fit all, but, you know, it may be that the child can learn how to breathe. The interesting thing is your breath is a very important tool. So when I'm working with children, I'm very mindful that my breath is very calm. I often use ujjayi breath so that they can hear me. Sometimes that drives kids nuts and they say, stop making that horrible noise, in which case you stop. But other times it becomes an invitation for the child to calm down. And I think one of the things that happens in the classrooms is that, and I don't say this in any way, shape or form judgmentally, but is that there's a very high charge because the teachers want to try and make it better. And, you know, our job is not to fix anybody. Our job is to be a presence that allows the child to find their own regulation. And the more that we regulate, as opposed to trying to find this and trying that and trying the other, where that kind of slightly frenetic energy will never help the child, then actually I think that it's, you know, we become a model vessel for that child, and invitationally, without language, we're inviting the child to breathe. There's another question that's appeared here, is how do you teach understanding of breath and movement to children who may be nonverbal or vary in their own world? Again, my breath becomes a form of communication. You know, 80% of communication is in fact nonverbal. So my presence then really matters. How am I communicating through my breath? How am I communicating through my energy? How am I listening? You know, communication is not just one way, it's both ways. How do I listen without you needing to have to say anything? Because obviously we work with a number of nonverbal children. What is your energy telling me? What are your movements telling me? And so you don't need to teach them to understand the breath. They actually have the capacity to learn how to use it when they start to feel it. And it may be that we can do that through touch. It may be through my breathing closely to you. It might be through different pressure points in the body that help to release blockages in the diaphragmatic area that help to calm the breath. Each child will have a different kind of way of working with that child. And just because they're in their own world doesn't mean they're not here and they can't see you. You know, oftentimes I've worked with profoundly autistic children and they have their back to you, and it's somehow like they have eyes in the back of their heads and they know where you are. They know exactly what you're doing, and they're choosing whether to participate or not. But sometimes they want to and they can't. And again, when we start to really deeply listen and learn how to listen and learn how to really be still inside ourselves, and then actually we are able then to be able to be present enough for the child to know what to, you know, the child can read us, we can read them, and we're just there with them, and we're just creating an energy field with the child where we're meeting them beyond the surface of blah blah blah, but actually from soul to soul, from heart to heart. And actually all of these children need that. I mean, we all have we're the same as these kids. We all have unmet needs. We all have basic needs. Forget unmet needs. We all have basic needs, which is to be listened to be heard, to be loved, to be respected, to be cared for. And these children are the same. And our job is to actually learn how to be present and to learn how to really deeply listen to any of these children. And we can only do that through our own practice, through really spending time in, you know, in our own stillness, in our own self-listening, in our own, in the essence of our own hearts. Because if I'm going to meet you from my heart to yours, I have to know my heart before I can meet yours. If I'm going to meet you soul to soul, I have to meet my soul to meet yours. So actually, that becomes really where the depth of powerful practice is. And you know, as a parent, you know, taking as many moments as we can to be able to still ourselves is really important. In whatever moments we can have, and particularly now when things are more challenging. So there's somebody else asking, what do I think about the use of EFT? EFT is great, but EFT requires intention, the way in which EFT is taught. So I don't use EFT. I mean, I might use the points, but I don't necessarily use the language that the EFT uses, because I think for most of the children that we work with, this would be utter and complete overload. And I think that there's an intentionality that can be used I think there's another acronym for it where they're using more intentionality rather than the pure EFT, which says, you know, even though I blah 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 blah, which I think is just overload for the children. So I think there are different ways to that. I will write, somebody asked me, can I repeat the website? Yes, I can. I will type it in here for you. So it's in, for anybody that's interested, it's in the chat from me. So I'm not sure whether there are any other questions, and I hope my answers have been helpful to you. If you, you know, you really want to work more with kids with special needs, I would invite you to explore our platforms. And money is not a, you know, shouldn't be a preventative for anybody. I've always made our work as available as possible. Yes, there are prices on things because we all have to live, but if you can't afford it, please contact us and we will help you, because I don't want anybody excluded from being able to be helped over money. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to suggest that perhaps we close the session. I think there's 3 more minutes. So if there's any one more question anybody wants to ask, you can get me for 3 more minutes. Otherwise, I am going to suggest that we end here. So thank you very, very, very much for joining me today. I felt quite nervous this morning before I came on, you know, being, you know, with such dignitaries in the world of neuroscience and yoga. So I'm very grateful for your presence. Thank you all very much. And the webinar, the recording will be available. So please share it with parents. Please share it with anybody that could be helped with the practices, this few handful of practices that I shared this morning. And I wish you all a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay peaceful, and stay well. Namaste. Thank you all very much.